Hello, my name is John and welcome to A Long Look. Today we look at the Norman Conquest and how it wasn't just 1066. We will look at how England was broken, rebuilt, and never truly the same. 1066 is treated like a door that closed in one motion. One battle, one king dead, one crown transferred. That version is neat, but it is also false. The Norman Conquest was not an event, it was a process, violent, uneven, and unfinished for decades. England was not conquered in a day. It was subdued, dismantled, and re-engineered over a generation. And long after William wore the crown, much of the country remained unconquered, resentful, and dangerous. This is the story after Hastings. This is where the real conquest began. William wins at Hastings in October 1066. Harold Godwinson is dead. The battlefield belongs to Normandy. By Christmas Day, William is crowned King of England at Westminster, but a crown does not mean control. It means only that one battle has been won, not the war for the country. Outside the southeast, nothing has settled. England does not fall silent after Hastings. It stiffens. Across the kingdom, local Anglo-Saxon lords still govern their lands. Regional armies remain armed and intact. Oaths given under pressure are treated as temporary. Loyalty is conditional, not surrendered. In the north, in the west, and along the Danelaw frontier, William's authority exists mostly on parchment, not in practice. To much of England, William is not the conqueror. That title comes later. In 1066 he is something far more dangerous. He is a foreign claimant, a duke from across the Channel, a man who arrived with an army and killed their king. And many English leaders are not prepared to accept this as destiny. Some hope to resist openly, others wait, watching to see whether William can actually hold what he claims. Several hedge their bets, swearing obedience while quietly preparing for rebellion. Even those who submit do so carefully. Their loyalty is not personal, it's transactional. If William protects them, they obey. If he falters, the oath dissolves, and William knows this. He cannot rule England the way the English kings ruled England. There are too few Normans, too many armed Englishmen, and too many old loyalties. So the conquest changes shape. It becomes slower, more brutal, and more deliberate. Castles begin to rise not as symbols but as weapons of occupation. Garrisons are planted deep inside hostile territory. Rebellions flare, collapse, and flare again. By 1067, England is not conquered, it is being conquered. And the hardest fighting, the kind that decides whether William's rule will survive us all, is still ahead. The year after Hastings was not peace. It was the beginning of a decade of rebellion, resistance, and fractured authority. From 1067 to 1071, England did not settle, it erupted. Not as one unified revolt, but as a constellation of local wars, uprisings, and regional refusals to accept Norman rule. This was not a simple rebellion, it was a fractured nation pushing back at a foreign occupier. In the north of England, Norman authority barely took hold. The region was shaped by centuries of Anglo-Scandinavian settlement and influence, a legacy of Viking integration and subsequent English consolidation. Many northern lords never accepted William's claim to the throne. York became a focal point of resistance. In 1068, local leaders expelled the Norman garrison. Anglo-Scandinavian and English nobles openly defied Norman taxation and levies. Rebels even sought support across the sea, reaching out to King Sven Estridsson of Denmark for assistance. In 1069 and again in 1070, Danish fleets arrived in northern waters. not as casual visitors but as invited allies to English insurgents. Their presence unnerved Norman governors and forced William into rapid military response. This was not polite negotiation, it was war on multiple fronts. In the Midlands and West, William's grip was similarly tenuous. Mercia, the old Anglo-Saxon power base once ruled by mighty earls, refused quick submission. Families still loyal to the old regime plotted and threatened open revolt. Two brothers, Edwin and Morcar, grandchildren of the Lady Godiva, originally accepted William's authority after Hastings, only to reconsider when Norman demands tightened. They became centres of organised resistance. Edwin controlled the North Midlands. Morcar held sway in the East Midlands. Their defiance encouraged other lords. Shropshire and Cheshire, border regions with their own military traditions and loyalties, remained unsettled and unstable, skirting between outright rebellion and uneasy compliance. William could occupy the southeast, but his authority frayed the further he moved into the old Anglo-Saxon heartlands. In the Midlands of eastern England, resistance took a different form. Here, terrain was power. The fens, wide stretches of bog, fen, and waterlogged ground, became a haven for resistance. From here emerged the figure now mythic in English lore, Hereward the Wake. No lord of high birth with polished armour and heraldry, Hereward embodied popular resistance. Local fighters, outlaws, and farmsteads united against foreign rule. The Fenlanders did not make pitched battles, they used the land itself as a weapon. Norman cavalry could not operate in bog and marsh. Heavy infantry was slowed and exposed. Rebels disappeared back into reeds and waterways. For William's knights and horsemen, trained for open field and tight formations, the fens were a nightmare terrain. William did not remain in England. Within months of Hastings, he returned to Normandy to secure his continental holdings and ensure his succession there. And the moment he left, England did not fall silent. Authority did not solidify, it fractured. Counties, earldoms, and local warbands asserted themselves. Norman sheriffs were murdered, castles were besieged, and rebels reclaimed towns. This was not a smooth conquest followed by slow assimilation. It was occupation under siege. A foreign ruler holding castles and strongpoints while the countryside refused to be pacified. The Normans controlled palaces, they did not yet control the people. William's answer to rebellion is not negotiation, it is not compromise, it is not cultural persuasion, it is architecture. From the moment it becomes clear that England will not submit quietly, the Normans began a construction program unlike anything the country has ever seen. They built castles, not slowly, not ceremonially, but at a speed and at scale. Before 1066, England had fortified towns and ancient earthworks. What it did not have was a nationwide system of private, lord-controlled fortresses embedded directly into civilian life. The Normans introduced exactly that. Across England, they constructed Motte and Bailey castles, rapidly assembled from timber and earth, designed to be raised in weeks, not years. Rebuilt in stone, once control is secured, these structures are not placed on distant hills or frontier edges, they are driven into the heart of towns. Norman castles are not just defensive refuges, they are tools of domination. Each one allows a permanent garrison of armed Norman soldiers, rapid deployment into rebellious districts, surveillance of markets, streets and roads, and immediate retaliation against unrest. From the castle tower, the occupier watches the occupied. From its gates, forces can be applied at a moment's notice. These castles are not built on empty land. They rise where English life already exists. To make room, homes are demolished, churches are torn down, Marketplaces are displaced, entire neighbourhoods are erased. In places like York, Norwich, Cambridge, Lincoln and Exeter, large sections of urban space are cleared by force. The message is unmistakable. Norman authority will not adapt to England. England will be reshaped to fit Norman rule. By the early 1070s, almost every major English settlement had a Norman castle. Many smaller towns do too. Each castle answers not to the local population but directly to the king or his barons. These fortresses do not integrate into English society, they sit on top of it. The castle becomes the centre of taxation, the centre of justice, the centre of military response, and the physical reminder of who now holds power. This is not just symbolic architecture, it is infrastructure. Castles allow William to rule a hostile country with a relative small Norman elite by concentrating force, projecting fear, and making resistance costly and visible. They turn conquest from an event into a system, and once they exist, they are very hard to remove. When we see Norman castles today, it is tempting to admire their stonework and silhouette, but in their original context, they meant something far simpler and far harsher. They meant you are being watched. Rebellion will be punished immediately. This land is no longer yours to govern. Castles are not romantic relics, they are machinery of occupation. And through timber, stone, and steel, William does not persuade England to submit. It builds submission into the landscape itself. By 1069, William's restraint is gone. 3 years after Hastings, England is still not pacified. The southeast may be subdued, but the north remains defiant. And now it rises again. York, already punished once, explodes back into rebellion. The city is taken by English rebels. Norman garrisons are overwhelmed and slaughtered. The castle falls. The Danish army lands, invited by English leaders seeking a restoration of the old order. For William, this is not just rebellion, it is a direct challenge to his claim to rule at all. William does not attempt another settlement. He does not negotiate with northern lords. He chooses something England has never experienced. From late 1069 into 1070, he unleashes what later chronicles will call the harrying of the north. This is not a battle, it is not a campaign, it is policy. Norman forces sweep through the north of England, especially Yorkshire and Northumbria, with explicit intent. They do not target armies, they target survival. Villages are burned systematically, crops are destroyed in the field, livestock is slaughtered, mills are wrecked, and food stores are emptied or burned. Anything that could sustain life through winter is eliminated. The goal is not to defeat the rebels, the goal is to make rebellion impossible. The timing is deliberate. The devastation begins just before winter. What follows is not simply hardship, but catastrophe. Contemporary chronicles describe widespread famine, mass death, cannibalism driven by desperation, people selling themselves into slavery for food, and entire villages disappearing. These are not later legends. They are recorded by men writing within living memory of the event. What makes the harrying stand out is not only its scale, but the reaction of those who supported William. Norman and pro-Norman chronicles do not celebrate it. They struggled to justify it. Orderic, Vitalis, Norman-born, said, and I quote, "I can scarcely relate without tears what William did. He laid waste the land, so that men and beasts alike perished." Others called it excessive, cruel, and a sin for which William must answer before God. One writer notes that William, for all his power, could not escape divine justice for what he had done. This is not enemy propaganda, it is internal resentment and unease. Years later, the impact is still visible. The Domesday Book of 1086 records vast stretches of northern England as waste, not profitable, not lightly populated, but just empty. Between York and Durham, entire regions show no taxable value, no functioning settlement, and no recovery even 17 years later. This is a measurable footprint of destruction. This is the moment everything changes. Before this, William claims legitimacy. After this, he rules through fear. The harrying of the North is not a tragic accident of war. It is a systematic terror, used deliberately to break a population. From this point on, resistance collapses. Not because England accepts Norman rule, but because survival demands submission. This is not conquest by victory, it is conquest by annihilation, and it leaves a scar on the land that lasts for generations. Before 1066, England had one of the most stable, entrenched landholding elites in Europe. Anglo-Saxon nobles controlled vast estates, commanded local armies, and governed through a mix of custom, law, and inherited authority. Their power was rooted in centuries of continuity. By contrast, within 20 years of Hastings, that world had been almost entirely erased. Anglo-Saxon nobles were killed in battle or executed after rebellion, stripped of their lands and wealth, exiled to foreign courts, or reduced to minor tenants, holding only scraps under Norman lords. By the time William commissioned the Domesday Book in 1086, the transformation was almost complete. Fewer than 5% of English lands remained in the hands of Anglo-Saxon lords. The Church, previously a pillar of local continuity, was dominated by Norman bishops. Political and military power rested in the hands of a foreign elite, a French-speaking, heavily armed, and loyal first to Normandy, not England. The landscape of power had shifted dramatically. England was no longer governed by its own people. It was ruled for Normandy, as an extension of a foreign duchy with castles, sheriffs and garrisons enforcing authority at every level. The old networks of kinship, local law, and regional loyalty had been replaced by a centralized, militarized regime that left little room for native autonomy. This was not merely conquest, it was social engineering. By eliminating the old Anglo-Saxon elite and installing a new, foreign hierarchy, William ensured that England would be firmly tied to the continent, politically, linguistically, and militarily, for generations. In 1086, William takes an unprecedented step. He orders a kingdom-wide audit unlike anything Europe has ever seen. Every corner of England is examined. Land, how much each manor holds, its boundaries and its value. Livestock, cattle, sheep, pigs, horses, and all movable wealth. People, the peasants, villeins, freemen, their obligations and status. Production, crops, mills, fisheries, and any sources of income. And ownership, who controls what, who owes service, who can be taxed. The result is the Domesday Book, a document not born of curiosity, but of calculation, control, and power. With it, William can tax precisely, ensuring that every shilling owed is accounted for, identify resistance, knowing which lords might rebel or withhold support, reward loyalty, granting land and titles based on documented service, and prevent fraud, leaving no estate unmonitored, no obligation unrecorded. No European ruler has ever attempted governance on such a scale. The Domesday Book transforms England from a loosely administered kingdom into one of the most tightly governed territories in medieval Europe, and it does so not because the realm is peaceful, but because it is watched, measured, and accounted for, its people and resources under the eye of a king determined to turn conquest into lasting control. Here, we see Europe's first police state. The conquest reshapes England, but it does not erase it overnight. What follows is not replacement, but stratification. For generations after 1066, the ruling class speaks Norman French, the language of court, command and privilege. The church operates in Latin, the language of law, doctrine and authority, and the population speaks Old English, the language of labour, home and memory. England becomes a country spoken in layers. Law itself turns hybrid. Norman legal frameworks are imposed, but Anglo-Saxon customs survive beneath them. Altered, diluted, but not destroyed. Local practices persist in manorial courts. Old obligations linger under new names. Memory resists even when power does not. Even the languages record the conquest. Peasants raise cows, nobles eat beef. Farmers tend sheep, lords wear mutton. Workers speak English, rulers issue commands in French. Food, clothing, labour and authority are split along linguistic lines. What is produced remains English, what is consumed becomes French. This is not assimilation, it is not cultural blending. It is layered domination, a society built vertically, where power sits above language, above law, above labour, and remains foreign long after the fighting ends. William dies in 1087. He leaves behind a kingdom that is conquered, but not settled. England remains unstable. Rebellions do not end with him, they continue under his sons. Castles dominate the landscape. Borders stay violent. The North remembers. Not just defeat, but devastation. What 1066 creates is not unity and not reconciliation. It creates a permanent ruling divide. The Norman Conquest centralizes power in the crown, militarizes governance through castles and force, replaces consent with control, and redefines kingship, not as stewardship, but as ownership. Land is no longer held by custom or inheritance alone. It is held by grant, by loyalty, and by threat of removal. England becomes something new, not freer, not safer, but more governable. A kingdom designed to be measured, taxed, watched, and enforced. And the model does not end in 1087. It embeds itself in law, in landholding, in authority itself. The conquest ends. The system remains. The Norman Conquest is not just medieval history, it is structural history. It marks the birth of the English state as a managed system, the origin of entrenched land inequality. The moment power becomes architectural, bureaucratic, and permanent. Castles are not just symbols, they are instruments. Records replace memory, surveys replace custom. Authority stops being personal and becomes systematic. 1066 is the spark, the conquest is the fire. And England lives in the aftermath for centuries. Because the conquest does not end when William wins, it ends when resistance becomes impossible. When power no longer needs to explain itself, only to enforce. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and until next time, take care.